Can we choose the kind of hope that we use going forward in the world? Given all the uncertainty, the difficulty, the disappointment, politically, social um, quagmires that we are dealing with, and of course, ecological predicaments that we're dealing with. Can we choose intentionally the kind of hope that we use and hold going forward? Well, that is the question for this episode, which means you are listening to Poetry, Gossip, and the Pursuit of Pleasure with Dale Byron. That's me. And this is the place where we use poetry in very practical and often unusual ways to help us in our everyday lives. Yep, that's what we're up to. So let's jump right in with our subject of this episode is called Hope on Fire, Just What's Needed. Hope on Fire, Just What's Needed. And what occurred to me is that traditional hope is tied essentially to the odds. In other words, traditional hope says if the odds are good, that what you want or what's your vision, then you have lots of hope. And traditional hope says that if the odds are not good, then you are bereft of hope. And what I'm saying is that I think we need a new kind. And the note I made for myself is I said that hope on fire is really a kind of metaphor for the kind of hope that is tied not to a predictable outcome necessarily, because I think that's what we're facing. And for example, when I was in my university days and started in university in my late teens, I knew pretty much what I needed to do to go from A to Z to get my degree. And eventually I did. I had some ups and downs, but eventually I did get and got through the university just fine. But I call it, I had a kind of, that was easy hope, because it was all laid out. It was all pretty predictable. I mean, there's some work you had to do and some, you were confronted with some things, as we all are at that time of our lives, at any time of our lives. But anyway, it was kind of an easier hope because it was predictable. But, what happens when our hope floats in a sea of uncertainty, a sea of conflict, a sea of loss? Might we be able to create a new, more durable and resilient hope is really what we're saying. A hope that has a shorter horizon, because usually hope is this thing that's sitting out there, this vision. And although I'm reminded of something that says that if our vision can be accomplished in one lifetime, then it's too small. It's too small. So, but we're in this territory of saying, can we have hope in the process, in the moment by moment process? And I've come up with this metaphor of a kind of new fire-tested hope that is tethered to joys and delights, and yes, to disappointments and tragedies along the way, but is tied not so much to some grand vision that we could imagine, particularly in politically and more with our environmental predicaments that we see. We go, the odds seem very long, quite honestly, as serious as that is to say, they do seem long. And yet, what is the hope that is more resilient? What is the hope that is fire tested? What is the hope that actually is on fire and allows us to keep going, to keep inspired? And I think that's really what we're talking about today. And so I want to jump right into the first poem, which is by a wonderful poet, Lucille Clifton. I've used her work in my teaching and with poetry and many years. And this poem is called Won't You Celebrate With Me? Won't You Celebrate With Me by Lucille Clifton. And it goes like this. Won't you celebrate with me? Won't you celebrate with me what I have shaped into a kind of life? I had no model. I had no model. Born in Babylon, both non-white and woman. What did I see to be except myself? What did I see to be? I love that internal rhyme. What did I see to be except myself? I made it up. I made it up here on this bridge between starshine and clay. Between starshine and clay. My one hand holding tight. My one hand holding tight. My other hand, come celebrate with me that every day, come celebrate with me that every day something has tried to kill me and has failed. Those last lines come at us like a freight train. She says, I made it up. In other words, she had to make her own life up. She didn't have models, a woman and a Black woman against many odds. She said, I made it up. I made it up here on this bridge between starshine and clay. This is one of the things I love is that, we know science tells us that we are made of star dust and we are made of the materials on this earth. I said in last week's podcast that we don't live on the earth. We live in the earth. We are made of the earth. Lucille Clifton tells us that. And yet we are also made of stardust and clay. I love that. Starshine and clay. My one hand holding tight my other. So she had to hold her own hand. She had to be her own mentor. She had to be her own comforting soul on the journey. My one hand holding tight my other hand. Come celebrate with me. Come celebrate with me that every day, something has tried to kill me and has failed. And has failed. That is certainly not traditional hope. That is not traditional hope. That is a fierce hope. I would say, using the metaphor that we're playing with today, that we're working with today, that is hope on fire. That is hope that has been fire tested. Lucille Clifton was born in 1936 in New York and grew up in Buffalo. She's no longer with us. She passed from this plane a few years ago. She was discovered, interestingly, by Langston Hughes, amazing poet, via a friend who shared her poems. Ishmael Reed shared her poems with Hughes, and Hughes published Clifton's poetry in his highly influential anthology called The Poetry of the Negro in 1970. So Lucille Clifton, I think, reminds us that traditional hope is often binary, or we think of it, because as we were saying, it's either yes, no. It's either I have hope or I don't. It's either I'm sure that we're going to, or I'm pretty sure that we're going to reach the goal, so I have hope. And if the goal looks nearly impossible, then I don't have hope. And so what we're saying is, what is a different kind of hope? What is a fire-tested hope? I was thinking that William Stafford used to say that this world is wonderful, even in its bleakness, even in its bleakness. I don't mean to make light of the pain along the path. And certainly, boy, these last lines in this Lucille Clifton poem brings that pain home. Celebrate with me that every day something has tried to kill me and has failed. Now, there is a paradoxical celebration in the middle of that. She's saying, I will not be stopped. I will sing of hope. I will sing of hope. Now, let's keep cooking. Let's keep moving. Remember our theme, hope on fire. Just what's needed is the little byline that I came up with. So it seems like these weeks that when I come up with a subject like this one for a podcast, that I get a little inspired to just delve out into a little bit of writing. And I did this week as well. And this poem is called Hope on Fire, freshly out of the oven. And it goes like this. Obviously, I was thinking about some of these themes as I was discovering what the words wanted to do, which is the way I like to write poetry. Remember, if the poet is not surprised, the reader will not be either. Okay. The poem goes like this. We've all learned to internalize that old kind of hope. We've all learned to internalize that old kind of hope. That yes or no, binary, good or evil, villain or hero hope. To remain cool, calm, while actually you feel like weeping. To remain calm, cool, while actually you feel like weeping. But maybe it's time to lift old hope off its cold stone statued haunches. Its cold stone statued haunches, inscribed with, if my dreams don't come true, there is no hope. Maybe this new hope must be midwifed into a different, more nuanced, complex, fierce, and fiery thing. Maybe it is better to hope for a new seeing, a new clearing. Yes, a painful hope, untethered from only that which can happen. It is a painful hope. It is a painful hope when the odds for what we want to have happen seem very slim. And yet, there is a certain kind of fierce hope, not denial, and not sticking our proverbial, as the cliche says, our proverbial head in the sand. It's not denial, but it is or it's not denial, or it's not ignoring, it's not happy talk. It is a hunkering down into a fierceness, a fire-tested, fierce hope. So let's go on with the poem. Maybe this new hope must be midwifed into a different, more nuanced, complex, fierce, and fiery thing. Maybe it's better to hope for a new seeing, a new clearing, a painful hope, untethered from only that which can happen, but rather connected to the most sacred kind of real, the most sacred kind of real. No, I don't mean that simple kind of greeting card hope. No, not that. No, not that. Not the kind that hasn't yet caught fire. I mean the kind of hope that breaks your heart wide open. The kind of hope that has you love especially all that's leaving. The kind of hope that does not only depend upon what happens, the hope that has you say, this time, I will not run away. That is a fierce hope indeed. I mean the kind of hope that breaks your heart wide open, the kind of hope that has you love especially all that's leaving, the kind of hope that does not only depend upon what happens, the hope that has you say, this time, I will not run away. So, what is this kind of hope that neither traffics in gloom and doom or in happy talk and denialism? See, gloom and doom, strangely, is a way of saying, I know. Gloom and doom is a way of a kind of resignation. And resignation is not what I'm talking about. Accepting the reality, accepting the deep down bone difficulty, and accepting the consequences that are coming our way via reality, at the flute end of consequences, is a kind of acceptance. So that hope, after that kind of acceptance, is not resignation. It is not resignation. It is a different animal. And it has us operate differently in the world. It is not, as we say, gloom and doom, nor is it happy talk and denialism, because either one of those will typically freeze us and keep us from doing the next right thing and the next right thing, no matter how small that is. The next right thing. I said both keep us from acting in our lives to do the next right thing. So my note says, stay joyful and grateful. Acknowledge and own our pain and sorrow. Do what we can as a me and as a we. There are certain things we can do as a me, and many things we must do as a we. Okay, let's keep cooking. This poem is by a poet that lives in the United States now, but grew up in China, Hajin. And he wrote a poem called A Center. And as one who practiced Aikido for many years, this poem jumped out at me some time ago, but I thought it fit with our theme. And I hope you'll agree with me. A Center by Hajin. You must hold your quiet center. You must hold your quiet center where you do what only you can do. Sounds like Mary Oliver. Where you can do what only you can do. Save only the soul you can save. Where you can do only what you can do. If others call you a maniac or a fool, just let them wag their tongues. If some praise your perseverance, don't feel too happy about that. Only solitude is a lasting friend. You must hold your distant center. Don't move even if earth and heaven quake. Don't move even if earth and heaven quake. If others think you are insignificant, well, that's because you haven't held on long enough. That's because you haven't held on long enough. As long as you stay put year after year, as long as you stay put year after year, eventually, you will find a world beginning to revolve around you. I love the way that poem ends. Yes, I think there's some fiery hope in that poem as well. Hajin, as I said, was born in China. By the way, I always say this. I am honoring these poets as we look at these like tiny little pieces of their portfolio. We choose a poem here or there to review and to look at and to enjoy and to savor and to use according to whatever theme and question we're exploring on a particular episode. But seek these people out and find their poetry, get their poetry books. I'm suggesting we do that. This poet, by the way, this poem is called A Center. It's Hajin, Hajin, Hajin. And as I say, he immigrated to the United States. He studied here, got his PhD at Brandeis University, and after Tiananmen Square, actually decided to stay. Okay. Let's switch gears. Let's go to a poet named Marge Piercy, and a poet I've loved for a long time. And this particular poem I've used on many occasions, but I thought it fits. It fits. And it's called To Be of Use, To Be of Use, To Be of Use. I think it fits. You decide. Here's the poem. The people I love the best, the people I love the best, jump into work head first without dallying in the shallows and swim off with sure strokes almost out of sight. They seem to become natives of that element. The black, sleek heads of seals bouncing like half-submerged balls. I love people who harness themselves an ox to a heavy cart. Starting to get the scene here. Who pull like water buffalo with massive patience, who strain in the mud and the muck to move things forward, who do what has to be done again and again. This is the point. This is the point that we're talking about with a fiery hope, with hope on fire, with hope that's been fire tested, that it does what needs to be done, that it moves forward, that its joys might be small or large, but it stays in the moment, in the now, which is the only place we can ever live. Who strain in the mud and the muck to move things forward, who do what has to be done again and again. I want to be with people who submerge in the task, who go into the fields to harvest and work in a row and pass the bags along, who are not parlor generals and field deserters, but move in a common rhythm. When the food must come in or the fire be put out, the work of the world is common as mud. The work of the world is common as mud. Botched, it smears the hands, crumbles to dust. But the thing worth doing, well done, has a shape that satisfies, clean and evident. Greek, amorphous, or for wine or oil. I'm sorry, let me say that again. Greek, amphoras, for wine or oil. Hopi vases that held corn are put in museums. Hopi vases that held corn are put in museums. But they were made to be used. They were made to be used. The pitcher cries for water to carry, and a person for work that is real. Those last two lines. The pitcher cries for water to carry, and a person for work that is real. Look, I have observed myself. I have certainly had my share of this old kind of hope, or what we're calling old hope. And I've certainly had my share of that. And yet, this new kind of hope is one which I think Marge Piercy is talking about here. Born in Detroit, Michigan, to a working class family that had been hard hit by the Depression. And Piercy was the first in her family to go to university. And she was involved in many political movements, a fierce poet and a brilliant poet. Okay. Let's end with this poem by W.S. Merwin. I've used him several times before, and he's a brilliant poet, great poet. It's called Thanks. Listen, listen. With the night falling, we are saying thank you. We are stopping on the bridges to bow from the railings. We are running out of the glass rooms with our mouths full of food to look at the sky and say thank you. We are standing by the water, thanking it, standing by the windows, looking out in our directions, back from a series of hospitals, back from a mugging, after funerals. We are saying thank you. After the news of the dead, whether or not we knew them, we are saying thank you. Over telephones, we are saying thank you. In doorways and in the backs of cars and in elevators, remembering wars and the police at the door and the beatings on stairs, we are saying thank you. In the banks, we are saying thank you. In the faces of the officials and the rich and all who will never change, we go on saying thank you, thank you. With the animals dying around us, taking our feelings, we are saying thank you. With the forest falling faster than the minutes of our lives, we are saying thank you. With the words going out like cells of a brain, with the cities growing over us, we are saying thank you faster and faster. With nobody listening, we are saying thank you, thank you. We are saying and waving, dark though it is. With nobody listening, we are saying thank you, thank you. We are saying and waving, dark though it is. That is obviously an incredibly fierce poem. That tests the kind of new hope we're talking about. More than anything, that tests it. When the forests are dying, when people are doing difficult, terrible things over and over again, when our lives are being buffeted around, and still we are saying thank you. Because we know that this kind of hope, this fire-tested hope, this fierce hope, is the kind of hope that keeps one foot in front of another. And if a vision, if we are heading into difficult times, and it seems that we are, perhaps this kind of hope can help us change what someone has referred to as the initial conditions. If we can change the initial conditions through our own work, through our own honoring of the process, through our own friendships, through our own moving toward the community, if we can do any of that, if we can change the initial conditions of how we enter difficult times, then we can make a difference for others and for ourselves. And you know, I believe that poetry can help us with this new fire-tested kind of hope. Well, that's a wrap. Thank you so much for your listening ear. Happy New Year again. We're moving into 2023. Thank you again for your listening ear. Refer this or send this podcast to others if you think they enjoy it. And until next time and next poems, take good care of yourself.